95% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. So if you think about that, these parents, and you can see the tears with a lot of those parents that were in the video, a lot of them had never met a deaf or hard of hearing person or interacted with them until they had a child that was born deaf or hard of hearing. So that whole thing, they're thrust into a whole world that they know nothing about. You know, most of them don't know sign language, they don't know anything about hearing aids, cochlear implants, any of that. So it's quite an adjustment, and we just really try to educate the families and say it's going to be okay. You know, we can just provide you with information. And a huge thing, when we talk about parent choice and communication opportunities, I'm a huge believer that a parent gets to choose what communication modality their child communicates through. You know, based on, you remember that audiogram that I showed you? Many professionals will look at that and say, oh, they definitely should be able to use oral language. Or they might look at that same audiogram and go, oh, they definitely should be a sign language. But here's the thing, parents get to choose, and I'm gonna tell you, because I've been doing this for so long, the audiogram does not tell you what language choice that child is gonna ultimately be a best fit for. We really try to promote in our program early on is to give kids the opportunity with both languages. So let's say I chose just oral language. My kid was more apt for sign, right? What if I just did sign, but my kid actually had, you know, some oral skills that they wanted to develop? A little baby can't tell us which language system or which language modality is going to be the best for them. So we promote that parent choice, but we always educate them thoroughly about the advantages of all different communication options out there. Here's the other thing. We spend a lot of time about talking about how language and speech are two different things. Do you guys know what the difference is? What's the difference between language and speech? Very, very different. So if I have a brand new baby, my parents will say, I want my child to speak. What they're really telling me is I want my baby to have a language to communicate. Okay? So they think it's speech, like talking, but what they're really saying is they want to be able to say, I want milk, I'm tired, I'm sick, I'm hungry, I want to play. Okay? So we spend a lot of our time, especially with early kids, saying, you know, language is more important than how we say it. Like instead of, you know, some parents will think, well, I don't want them to say wabbit, I want them to say rabbit. Well, that's not important early on. The important thing is that language. Okay? And then we just look at, as I said earlier, reading is tied to language level, so we focus a lot on strategies to improve language, to improve access to academics. I work a lot with the educational team with that. And then also trying to connect deaf and hard of hearing kids with strong deaf mentors. So we're so awesome in South Dakota, we have CSD, where we have great deaf individuals that can go into schools and go into families and show families, you know what, I'm deaf, look at me, I'm doing awesome, your kid's gonna be okay. Right? So it's awesome to have that potential and ability. Yes?
I guess I don't know the numbers on this, but I feel like I've heard that a lot of times children who have like a hearing loss also have other like vision loss or other like developmental disabilities. Is this something you work with a lot in your program?
So the statistics are broadly about 40% of our deaf and hard of hearing kids have something else going on. So that is very true. So, and I would almost venture to think, sometimes in South Dakota, I think that's a little bit higher. It seems like it's more prevalent than 40%. It seems to me it's about half of the kids that we would work with. But statistically, overall, 40% of them. And that's why it's really important early on to look at the whole child. Some people will say, you know what? This communication system is not working for this child. You know, they're really far behind in their development. One of the things we also have to look at is are there other things that are also going on that might be impeding their development? But great question with that. Okay, and then we also have a foundation. We're super lucky that we have a foundation that is able to offer sign language classes for families in Sioux Falls. We have a teen group to allow teens to see other kids that are deaf and hard of hearing. Mark is involved with that at times at SDSD. We're so fortunate to have him doing that. We have family trainings and classes that the foundation funds. And then we collaborate a lot with other universities. USD we collaborate a lot with. CSD with Mark and his organization, Augie, Parent Connection, all sorts of organizations. We go into pretty much any school or college that will let us talk and spread the word is basically what we do. And then this summer, we're gonna have our Midwest Conference on Deaf Education here in Sioux Falls. And deaf educators, professionals, anyone really who works with deaf and hard of hearing kids can come and learn about best practices of working with deaf and hard of hearing kids. And that's this summer in June. I'm looking at the time. Here's just some more things that we do. We have a team of girls that go out and assess kids that are 13 and older to get them ready for life after school. And we also sit on a lot of committees to kind of promote early detection of kids to get them that access as early as we can. Any kiddo in the state of South Dakota that's in our program can get a scholarship for a tech school or a four-year university their freshman year. And we're super excited. We have Hands in Motion. So this is a program in Sioux Falls, the month of July. Kids come to school Monday through Friday for 3.5 hours, and it's a free program. And they can interact with professionals that know sign and know best practices for teaching deaf and hard of hearing kids. Okay. And the new thing that we have, we meet once a month, and parents can come on and we do a topic of the month to teach them about something to do with deafness. It's called our Parent Listen and Chat. Okay. You know, we're supposed to be done at 9:20, right?
9:20 is fine, yeah, that's fine.
What time do you use your 9:20? Is
The
that what
class
you said?
ends at 9:50.
Oh, 9:50. Oh, 9:50, okay. And then just, I feel like one of the things I really want you guys to know is what we do, we don't have a classroom. So I've worked where, you had your go to school every day, you have the same kids that come in and see you. We are constantly traveling. So I went, like the other day, I went to Wagner, then I stopped in at Yankton, and then I flew by Vermilion, and then I had a parent in Sioux Falls. So we have to be pretty flexible. So if you're a person who wants to work 8 to 5, this isn't the job for you. We might have to be on the road at 6:30. The other night I got back from an IEP in one of my school districts at 8 o'clock at night. So it just really, really depends. We have to be very flexible with our schedules because we don't really have any set days. We have to meet the needs of schools and parents. The other thing, you have to really be good about going in with a team of professionals. We as consultants are invited guests in the state of South Dakota. A school district doesn't have to use us. A parent can ask us to work with them, and then the school district allows us to go in. So we're kind of different. There are certain individuals in the state of South Dakota who can advocate, go in and say this is what that child needs. We can recommend, but we cannot demand. If we demanded, some schools would probably kind of show us where the door was. So we are an invited guest. We share with them best practices, what research shows, what we know is to be best for deaf and hard of hearing kids. But ultimately, the school districts and the teams get to decide how they do educate that child. But as part of that, though, we try to be a key member, and we're very involved in things that are called IEPs. I don't know if you guys know what IEP is. So everybody that goes through the special education process and it's determined that they need special help, they have a plan set up for them. And if you're birth to 3, that's called an IFSP. And if you're 3 until high school graduation, that's called an IEP. So that's just the special plan. And we sit on those committees to make recommendations that would be the best fit for that child. And then if you're a kiddo who might be deaf or hard of hearing, who does not qualify for special education, you might be on something called a 504. And that basically are just some accommodations that that child might need. Like make sure, they have visual access to you when you're teaching. Make sure they have their hearing aids on. Make sure they have an interpreter for a kiddo that doesn't need special education services in addition to an interpreter. So some of the other things we do, we spend a lot of time just sending resources, training families and school districts on how to use technology. And as most of our outreach members will say, that are deaf and hard of hearing. We have Julie Luke and Sherry Jurgens are both deaf consultants on our team. And one of the things that they said was the hardest thing for them being mainstreamed is they were typically the only deaf kiddo in their schools. So we spend a lot of time bringing kids together that are deaf and hard of hearing so they can see other kids that maybe sign, other kids that have technology, other kids like them. So socialization is a huge thing, connecting the kids and then also those families. So we just do a lot, just a large variety of things. And then the other thing we do, as I said before, we do home visits. So we're constantly working with those families and providing emotional support. As you can see, for those little ones that we work with, parents are pretty teary-eyed early on, those first couple of years. And so you have to just be a very good listener and encouraging with them and just helping them navigate this whole new world that they've been thrown into. And during those visits, not only do we provide that emotional support, we're sharing resources, and we're really trying to let those families know where their child is developmentally. What can you do to get your child to where they should be for their age? What are some things that you could be doing to help them to get to those benchmarks? Because again, we know that those language benchmarks lay the foundation for literacy. And then the other thing we do a lot with home visits, we have to kind of go into the medical mode, because early on we talk a lot about surgeries, like if it's a cochlear implant or hearing aids or hearing levels. But what we also want to do is show that there's also a cultural side to this. And so if I have a child that I'm working with, what I try to do is bring a deaf adult into the picture, someone who knows the culture. Me as a hearing person, I don't know that, but I'm going to invite someone from CSD or one of my deaf team members to come in and meet this family and to show them that whole other side of our services. Kind of talked about what we do at school visits. We sit on those meetings, we train staff, we train other kids, and we observe in those classrooms, trying to make the curriculum as accessible as possible. And the teacher of the deaf comparison consultant, the main difference between what most of our team members do and a traditional teacher of the deaf, a teacher of the deaf typically has daily hands-on in 1 or 2 schools with the same set of kids. We are more of a consultant and just give advice to teachers. And it could be a teacher of the deaf, but it could be a classroom teacher, could be a special education teacher. So there's a variety of things. And then when we're thinking about the challenges, the biggest thing that I would say is hard and why most of us kind of burn out is the distance. We have some outreach consultants that have to drive 3 hours to see one kid from their home base. That's a lot of time on the road, so it's 6 hours just to get back and forth to that kiddo. That can be a huge challenge. We're really promoting teledistance now, so trying to connect with schools through online platforms, through FaceTiming, Cisco WebEx, Zoom meetings, those types of things. Because if we have less time on the road, we have more time to help those schools, right? Less windshield time and more assistance. So we're promoting that as much as we can. The other challenge is as things change all the time. So we're, as I said earlier, we're constantly trying to learn and stay up with best practices. We won't go into a school and tell them what to do unless we know there's some evidence behind it or there's research behind it. Not just because I think something, it's because we know it to be true based on research. Okay. Another huge challenge is, like I am supposed to be at 4 IEP meetings within 2 hours in 4 different cities in South Dakota. So it's very challenging. It seems like everything falls on the same day, at the same time, and in different locations. So scheduling can be kind of tricky, and we have to just really end up prioritizing what we need to really tackle, or see if people would be willing to move things around. Another thing that's kind of challenging, I have a kiddo, and a lot of us have this, we have one child that signs maybe in southern South Dakota. He's the only signer in that 2-hour radius. How do we connect him with other individuals who sign, who use the same language system? He has an interpreter, but no other people that really sign. So we've really reached out to try to figure out how to connect kids. We connect kids across through Zoom or whatever, across South Dakota. I've connected with some of my kids with kids in Nebraska in some of their deaf ed programs. We've connected some kids from South Dakota to Minnesota. But we really just want to make sure that these kids have other kids that they can communicate with. Another huge thing that we have a hard time with, and we think it's so important, is getting families together. But let's say I have an activity in Sioux Falls, and most of my families are Yankton, Vermilion area. Most families work full time, and both families, both the male and the female in South Dakota work. We're one of the highest dual income family states in the United States. So trying to get those families to come to events in Sioux Falls can be kind of challenging. To really get them to travel anywhere can be kind of challenging. So we really have to be creative about different options. That's why we try that parent listen and chat, where we have parents, like the other night I taught a class at 8 o'clock at night, because parents have put their kids to bed, and then they can log on to the computer. Right? So we have to be pretty flexible with that. Another thing, I'm a huge, passionate person about whatever you choose for your child, do it with 100%. Right? I don't care what you do, but if you're going to choose sign language for your child, you need to give it 100% and be fluent. Because we know that children need language models to grow their language. Right? And not only do they need to just have it, you need to read to them, you need to play to them, and you need to sign to them. And so we teach parents about following through. If you want sign, that's awesome, but what resources can we get you to that level where you can communicate with your child? If you want your child to be a spoken English user, parents will say, I want them to listen and talk. Well, then we need to have those devices on 100% of waking hours. We need that on consistently, and you need to sing, read, talk, and play with your child consistently. So we spend a lot of time with trying to help families figure out why they aren't following through with whatever modality they have, and supporting them as best we can, and recruiting other individuals. You know, if it's a sign language kid, can we get CSD in there to help us out? Who can we get to support that family the best to reach their goal for their child? And that kind of the rest of it pretty much summarizes what I said. Okay. Go to our resource page, check out those sign language resources. Those are kind of fun to see what's all out there. Like I said, there's so many different deaf individuals from our community that have helped us put together these resources, and we're really proud of them. We'd love for you to go check those out. That's it. I know Mark said he had some stuff he wanted to talk about. Do you guys have questions?
Sure, let's take 5 minutes to do some questions, Q&A.
Yeah.
Anyone have some questions? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm from Aberdeen, and I volunteered at the School for the Blind, and we met the little girl who's like fully blind and fully deaf.
Mm-hmm.
So does she mostly work with the advocate through SDSD, or is it mainly through the School for the Blind?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question with that. So every child has a consultant assigned to them. And so Eileen Anderson is our consultant in the Aberdeen area. She's actually housed at School for the Blind, so she works with that team. But there is, oftentimes when we have kiddos like that, they'll assist with it, but they do have maybe more needs on the vision side, mobility, some of those types of things, life skills. But we do definitely sit on those teams also. Good question with that. Yes?
So do you guys utilize speech language pathologists?
Yes. We spend a lot of time, so like I said, my background is speech language pathology, so I spend a lot of time just supporting speech language pathologists about how to work with deaf and hard of hearing kids. In the summer, we run a clinic called Just Communicate, where kids that meet certain criteria can come in, and we run a program for that. But yeah, so we go out there and we support kids through more consultation with their school district speech language pathologist. But we do have 3 speech pathologists that work on our evaluation teams. So myself, Krista Halseth, who used to work at School for the Deaf, and there's another girl named Susie Jones who used to work at a deaf school in another state. So, good question. Yes?
I guess I'm just curious, like, why do you find that a lot of parents who have
hard to keep them on.